My name's Brandon and this is Cartoon Network Video Game History, a show where I take a look back on all of the video games based on Cartoon Network shows and retrospectively review them. Another day, another Adventure Time game. Cartoon Network really didn't have many other properties to lean on in this period of their history. Adventure Time: The Secret of the Nameless Kingdom released on November 18, 2014, about a year after the last Adventure Time game had hit shelves and digital storefronts. Fans could find the game on PS3, Xbox 360, PC, PlayStation Vita, and the 3DS. However, home console Nintendo fans were out of luck, as for some reason there was no Wii U release. I get the Wii U sold poorly, but if you're releasing a title on the Vita, you might as well throw a bone to the Wii U as well. You'll also notice that, despite being released in very late 2014, this game isn't on PS4 or Xbox One. What's up with that? The next-gen consoles had been out for an entire year at this point, so why wouldn't you make versions for those as well? Many developers still release games exclusively for the older platforms early in a new generation's lifecycle due to there being a much larger install base for those consoles, but after a year on the market, surely you start to make the jump. Just like Explore the Dungeon because I don't know, the licensing rights expired for this title and it was subsequently removed from digital stores. From March 31, 2018, fans have no longer been able to purchase this game through digital platforms, essentially making it impossible to buy a brand new copy anymore. Eventually, this game would probably be entirely lost to time if it wasn't for emulation. As almost all of the recent games have been, Secret of the Nameless Kingdom was developed by WayForward. They have now developed 4 of the last 5 Cartoon Network games, and so far they're the only developer who's been allowed to touch the Adventure Time franchise. However, that would all come to an end right here. This would be the last Cartoon Network home console game they would develop, with their only other release being an Adventure Time iOS puzzle game. As you probably know by now, WayForward started out promising, but soon fell apart. Hey Ice King was a great experience, the other two not so much. For this title we have a new publisher at the helm, Little Orbit, who have taken over from D3 and Bandai Namco. Critical response for Secret of the Nameless Kingdom was actually pretty positive. It has a 6.5 average for the 3DS version and a 5.8 average for the 360 version. Nintendo Life gave it a 7, while GameSpot and Push Square gave it a 6. What you will notice is that not many big name sites gave it a review. Not entirely sure why, but it probably has something to do with the average video game fan not caring about a cartoon adaptation released on previous gen consoles. WayForward have shown they can be a capable developer of an Adventure Time game, and the critical response is solid. Hopefully this is one last hurrah for them. But before I explore the Nameless Kingdom, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It's the only way to make sure you catch all my upcoming reviews, including Steven Universe and OKKO games, and my Nickelodeon video game history series, which isn't too far away. But now, on with the review. When you jump into Secret of the Nameless Kingdom, you'll immediately be hit with a sense of deja vu if you've played Explore the Dungeon. To the naked eye, it looks like a proper follow-up to that game. WayForward have heavily reused assets from the previous game, which isn't a bad thing, but this initially made me think we were getting a proper sequel. Mentally, I was preparing myself for another 100 flaws. However, while it looks very similar on the surface, it is actually quite different. In fact, it feels like a hybrid between both of their previous Adventure Time games. Once you start playing, you'll realize that the game doesn't take place in endless dungeons anymore. In fact, there really aren't that many flaws here at all. Instead, this game plays almost identically to The Legend of Zelda, specifically A Link to the Past. Now, A Link to the Past is considered by many to be one of the greatest games of all time. Not by me though. If there's one thing you need to know about my gaming tastes, is that I do not like The Legend of Zelda, for the most part. I will admit that I'm yet to play Breath of the Wild, and from what I've seen it actually looks right up my alley, but for the most part, Zelda does not click with me. I've just never really seen the appeal. The combat isn't particularly enjoyable and is usually rather shallow, while the puzzle solving is either tedious or involves ridiculously obtuse solutions, like bombing random inconspicuous walls. People also like to discuss the lore and stories, but they've never grabbed me. Overall, the world of The Legend of Zelda has never been my cup of tea. Hey Ice King, which was a clear homage to The Adventure of Link, was actually not too bad though. It wasn't amazing, but I could stomach it a lot better than most Zelda games. I cannot say the same for Secret of the Nameless Kingdom. To put it simply, I hate this style of game. I know I'm bringing a bunch of bias to this review, but I can't help it. Everybody has those genres that they just can't enjoy no matter what. I don't like The Legend of Zelda, which is the pinnacle of games in this genre, so it's a little wonder that I didn't like the knockoff Adventure Time version. For those unfamiliar with these games, here's how it goes. Things kick off and your heroes are given some sort of quest to go on. Once they give you a little bit of story, you're sent out into the Overworld to discover dungeons that you need to conquer in order to save the day. One of the key aspects of this style of game is that you're left to your own devices. Sure, sometimes characters will give the vaguest of hints of where to go or what to do, but for the most part it's up to you to figure out what the heck you need to do. Naturally, this results in you basically wandering around aimlessly, and this is where the frustrations start to set in for me. It's not fun to just stumble around blindly. In Secret of the Nameless Kingdom, you're tasked with finding 3 princesses, which means you're heading to 3 dungeons. Discovering the first dungeon is a pretty easy process. The next 2 though, God, that is a slog. Even if you watch a walkthrough where the person knows how to get through every step expertly, it'll still take you upwards of 30 minutes. That means you're spending at least half an hour wandering through a pretty boring overworld. The overworld stuff always just feels like busy work. Enemies always respawn, so you're constantly dodging them just to get to where you need to be. Don't engage with the enemies, it's pointless. They can easily be avoided almost all of the time, and unless you need a health pickup, there's no point fighting them. Even then, it's much more efficient to cut down bushes to find health. While you're dodging these boring enemies, you'll often be trying to solve puzzles, which 99% of the time are just one massive string of fetch quests. Almost every time it's just some sort of sequence where you need to give person A an item, so they'll give you an item you can deliver to person B, who then gives you something that will finally let you proceed to the next dungeon. Not only is this process so unbelievably boring, but some of the solutions are downright ridiculous. At one point, Cinnamon Bun is blocking a bridge. WayForward doesn't even give an excuse for this. They basically just outright say, I'm a roadblock just for the sake of it. It's like that group of dancers in Pokemon Black and White 2 who say they are blocking your path for no reason. The only hint given is that Cinnamon Bun will move if he's given something fun to do. Okay, so you'd assume you have to give him an entertaining item, like a video game or something along those lines. Instead, the solution is just insane. You give him a fart in a bag. A fart in a bag. No, this isn't something I'm making up. First off, why? And secondly, the process to actually obtain this is just so incredibly dumb. To kickstart things, you need to acquire a Ziploc bag. Then you need to encounter one of these enemies who only occasionally sends farts at you. Once you scoop that up, you can take it to Cinnamon Bun. I have no idea how anybody would have discovered this solution on their own. At least half this game is spent doing idiotic chores in the overworld. I cannot find any enjoyment in this. What about the gameplay inside of dungeons? It's here that proper puzzle solving, rather than fetch quests, becomes the priority. You'll still encounter enemies, but like the overworld, they're more of a nuisance than anything. Most of the time you'll just sprint past them, unless they start getting in the way of a puzzle. Combat gameplay is just so shallow. The game controls almost exactly how Explore the Dungeon did, but they have completely neutered the combat. The combat wasn't exactly deep, or that much fun, but there still was plenty of weapons and that sort of thing to at least jazz it up a bit. Secret of the Nameless Kingdom is that, but with all of the bells and whistles stripped away. Essentially, your choices for combat mostly come down to swinging your standard sword and throwing bombs. No cool weapons to find here. Jake is used as a shield and to grab things, and eventually with an hour left in the game, you gain the ability to control him separately. This is mostly used for puzzles and overcoming various roadblocks, but I have no idea why they saved it for so late in the game. Having this from the start would have made things at least a little bit more interesting. Combat just isn't enjoyable. It's brainless stuff when almost every enemy is dispatched by just spamming the attack button without any thought. Dungeons are mostly about puzzle solving. These aren't too bad, to be honest. I'm not a huge fan of puzzle heavy games, but I didn't have a problem with these for the most part. They're not my cup of tea, but for players who enjoy that sort of thing, I would imagine they'd get a kick out of it. What did get kind of annoying is how long these dungeons stretch on for. But I hear you saying, Brandon, weren't you just complaining that you spend too much time in the overworld and not enough time in dungeons? Well, firstly, who are you and how did you get in my apartment? Secondly, you're not wrong in saying that, but these dungeons really overstayed their welcome. When you look at the overworld map for the game, you'd imagine there would be plenty of dungeons to explore, and there kind of are. There are smaller side dungeons that are completely optional but will often give you some sort of reward, like a Legend of Zelda style health shard. These are never necessary and are actually tucked away a lot of the time, meaning you can miss them altogether. I would have preferred that they gave you more smaller dungeons rather than 3 long ones. 75% the way through every dungeon, you're just begging for them to be over. It just stretches on and on and on until you get to the end and you're rewarded with underwhelming boss battles. The second dungeon boss battle is particularly underwhelming. All you do is rearrange crystals in holes while the boss does the bare minimum to attack you. Not exactly the fun reward after 45 minutes of dungeon exploring. I suppose I should be grateful I didn't have to trek through 100 floors to get to it. Like a Zelda game, there are plenty of items to both find and purchase. Treasure has returned from Explore the Dungeon, and thankfully you don't lose it all when dying. Outside of treasure, you'll be picking up a lot of stuff that doesn't seem to have much use. These nuts, for example. I'm still not entirely sure what their purpose was. They should have called this game Adventure Time Collect the Nuts because I don't know. In general, this game has so many quality of life issues, to the point where I can't believe this is from the same team behind Hey Ice King. WayForward was so good at identifying the issues that needed to be addressed to make a Zelda 2 style game more enjoyable, but they missed these issues completely here. For example, why is viewing the map so tedious? In the last game, all you needed to do to bring up the map was press select. Here you have to pause the menu, scroll through a bunch of screens, and then look at the map. This easily could have been something you brought up on the fly while still controlling Finn and Jake. I also didn't understand why I couldn't just purchase bombs in the game. Instead, you have to encounter these exploding enemies, knock them down, and then snatch them up with Jake. This is kinda cool, until you run out for whatever reason and you're unable to progress. All this results in is you farming bombs every time you come across these enemies. And my biggest quality of life issue is that when you die, you don't start back with full health. This is so annoying. Being kicked all the way back to the start of the dungeon is punishment enough for dying. Why do I also have to be left with 3 hearts of health? All of these things I've mentioned combine to make dungeon gameplay unenjoyable. It had the potential to be Secret of the Nameless Kingdom's saving grace, but instead, WayForward keeps shooting themselves in the foot.
Over that hill, there's a place we've never been.
You can explore the Nameless Kingdom,
There's things we haven't seen.
solve puzzles, find loot,
Loot we haven't looted.
battle new enemies,
And buns that haven't been kicked.
and unravel the secret of the Nameless Kingdom.
Tonight, we're gonna kick those buns. We're gonna loot that loot. We're gonna see all that stuff. And then we're gonna do something else.
Adventure Time, Secret of the Nameless Kingdom.
The Legend of Zelda is not my cup of tea, and a shoddy Adventure Time clone of it is certainly not going to be the game to finally change my opinion on this genre. I guess I could sort of understand a Zelda fan getting a kick out of this game. If you're into that style of gameplay, you might find a few nuggets of enjoyment here and there. But if you're not a fan, I don't know if I could recommend it. Secret of the Nameless Kingdom is pretty light on story or comedic moments, so even Adventure Time fans might be struggling to squeeze an enjoyable experience out of this. The gameplay loop here is tedious and a slog, in my opinion, so be wary of your taste in games before popping this one in your PlayStation Vita. With the conclusion of this review brings the end of Cartoon Network's love affair with WayForward. They came onto the scene hot with Hey Ice King, but the follow-ups didn't hit for me. It's a real shame because Hey Ice King was a genuinely fun experience. I wasn't expecting to enjoy it that much. I think WayForward's problem was they never really brought any original ideas to their last 3 games. Hey Ice King worked because they took the first 2 Legend of Zelda games and seemed to ask themselves, what are the main issues that need to be addressed with these games? With the games that followed, they basically just made pale imitations of pre-existing games that didn't make any changes or made changes that made them worse. Considering all 4 of their games just copied things that already existed, I feel like they didn't have any original ideas, or more likely, they just wanted to shoot these games out as quickly as possible, and copying an already existing structure was easiest. Next time we'll be breaking new ground on Cartoon Network video game history. I'll be reviewing a mobile game. The very first Steven Universe game, Attack the Light, was an RPG released exclusively on mobile platforms. Usually I wouldn't review mobile games as they're often just glorified flash games, but this is a proper RPG and as such it's worthy of a review. Will the first foray into video games pay off for Steven Universe? Make sure you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out.